Join us today for this inspiring episode of Surviving Burnout Recovery, 60 Seconds at a Time, with Carrie Severson. Discover how Carrie's powerful journey through her husband's cancer diagnosis highlights the resilience needed not just for patients, but also for the caregivers who support them. This episode offers invaluable insights into the unique challenges faced by grandparents raising grandchildren that are balancing the dual responsibilities of caregiving. Carrie shares her heartfelt story of receiving her husband's life-altering cancer diagnosis and how her world came to a standstill. Learn how she developed a robust support team encompassing medical, psychological, and spiritual elements to navigate this challenging time. So whether you're directly impacted by cancer or you find yourself in a caregiving role, this episode is packed with wisdom and practical tips for building a community of support and ensuring self-care. So tune in and be inspired by Carrie's journey of strength, hope, and love. Welcome to Grandparents Raising Grandchildren, Nurturing Through Adversity. In this podcast, we will delve deep into the challenges and triumphs of grandparents raising grandchildren. As we navigate the complexities of legal, financial, and emotional support, I invite you to join us on a journey of exploring thoughts, feelings, and beliefs surrounding this growing segment of our society. Drawing from real stories and expert advice, we will explore the nuances of child-rearing for children who have experienced trauma and offer valuable resources to guide you through the intricate journey of kinship care. We'll discuss how we can change the course of history by rewriting our grandchildren's future, all within a supportive community that understands the unique joys and struggles. This podcast was made especially for you. Welcome to a community where your voice is heard, your experiences are valued, and your journey is honored. I believe that Carrie's deeply personal story will resonate with many of you. Whether it's cancer burnout or childcare burnout, we can all relate. The first 6 months of caring for my 2 grandchildren who had experienced trauma and faced developmental and behavioral issues were incredibly overwhelming. I found myself struggling to keep up and felt the shadows of burnout creeping in. But then everything started changing when I discovered some invaluable caregiving burnout tips. 60 seconds at a time. Our lives can be transformed the way we approach caregiving. Stay tuned as we delve into these life-saving strategies and explore the importance of building a supportive team, emotionally, medically, and spiritually. So whether you're a grandparent raising grandchildren or facing caring for a loved one, this episode is filled with insights and hope to help you through this journey. Carrie and I came into our positions as caregivers in different ways, and yet we have so many similarities that I'm looking forward to discovering in this conversation. But Carrie, why don't you tell us about your journey and what led you to write your memoirs about caregiving?
Well, I've always been a writer. I've been a professional storyteller for 30 years. My journey into being a storyteller started a long time ago. I was in college. I wanted to change the way media portrayed women, and so I was always out looking for great female stories to put in the spotlight and emphasis. And I ended up creating a nonprofit long time ago. It was a bullying solutions organization for young girls, and I burned out as a result because the demand for it was everywhere. It was a bullying, girl-on-girl bullying after-school program, launched in Arizona and grew it nationally. I wrote my first memoir was about my burnout experience because of my entrepreneurship. And that was published in 2022. And it caught this wave of burnout and, post COVID. And a lot of corporate women called my book a mental health book. And I was asked to come in and speak to Fortune 500 employees about burnout recovery. So I learned a lot about burnout through my own personal experience. Entrepreneurship burnout was very different than anything I experienced prior to that. But in 2023, my husband was diagnosed with cancer, and I went from being an entrepreneur, leading burnout recovery workshops for hundreds and thousands of people, to his advocate and caregiver literally overnight. He had head and neck cancer. It was pretty severe and really nasty. Very grueling schedule of radiation and chemo. But because of where they called it a tumor cluster, it started at the base of his hairline and ran down to his collarbone. He couldn't eat or drink. And so consistently, doing everything I can to get him proper nutrition, fighting with the hospital itself. Caregiving burnout was very different than entrepreneurship burnout. And it really was a matter of life or death, where entrepreneurship burnout is something that most entrepreneurs don't recognize they're in, but keep themselves in because they're stuck in that rat race and don't know how to get out. And caregiving burnout was more like, if I stopped driving him to therapy, if I stopped advocating for him, if I didn't force him to get a feeding tube, there would have been a very different outcome. Being a storyteller, the only way I was able to really process that trauma was writing about it. And so I used Caring Bridge, a platform for caregivers. I used that throughout my experience caring for him. And I often said, someone needs to write a book about caregiving from a marital perspective. What is it like caregiving for your spouse, fighting with your spouse to provide care for him? And, and people were always like, oh, you should write the book. You should write the book. So at the end of our experience, I was like, I think I will. And so I just finished that memoir, which hopefully is released next year.
Is that I saved you, do the dishes, love your caregiver?
Yeah. Great. When I did research, when I did some focus groups, a common theme in a lot of caregiving groups, particularly when you're working with your spouses, that chore home responsibility, and there can easily be some resentment in that space and anger, losing your identity and the disease itself. But yeah, the name came out before I realized it, and I shared it with an editor and an agent, and they were both like, this is, you can kind of laugh at it, but it seems to fit.
Tell us about some of the differences in what you come up against as far as burnout goes, taking care of a family member. I recently received an email from a listener named Laurel. At 61, Laurel and her husband, who's navigating his own health challenges, are now raising their grandson after a series of unimaginable losses. In 2022, they lost their son to a fentanyl overdose. Then just a year ago, they lost their daughter the same way. The morning after, they'd stayed up late together planning her son's 3rd birthday party. Laurel told me that she lives one day at a time. She's dealing with the financial strain of using her 401k to survive, the physical toll of caregiving, and the emotional weight of what ifs. But she also said something that I want everyone listening to hear. She said that just telling her story to people who can relate is refreshing. That's exactly why we do this. Whether you're navigating addiction in your family, raising a grandchild you didn't expect to be raising, or just trying to find your footing after a loss, we need to hear your story. There's always someone else out there who needs to hear that they aren't the only one. Your experience is a lifeline for someone else. So if you have a story to share, or if you're looking for that community Laurel found, please join our Facebook group or sign up for our newsletter on our website at grandparents-raising-grandchildren.org. Let's keep relating, and let's make sure no one walks this path in silence. Thank you, Laurel, for your courage to share your story with others.
Well, obviously we're in the same household, and so trying to find that place of peace and making sure that we're, it wasn't, always a hot spot or an uncomfortable place. Like he needed a calm place to restore, but so did I. And constantly walking that line, particularly when you're dealing with a disease that had as many, what's the word I'm looking for? It had, he had this side effect where he would throw up ropes of mucus and blood clots. So it was high panic a lot of times, and doing what I could to provide that quiet and that place of still having a nurturing environment was really important. And I think that took a lot of extra energy from me. So when I actually adopted like the newborn philosophy. When he would rest, I would rest, whether I would actually be able to sleep or simply just stay still and, focus on my breathing.
Yeah.
But I think, there's so many family caregivers in the United States, and a lot of us are in the same situation where we're living with the person that we're caring for and finding that balance of support and yet, like, I don't want to use the word authority, but like if he like refused to eat, or if he staying on top of all of those kind of components, but then also providing that nurturing environment. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot.
I can identify with that because it's not dissimilar than the roles that we're playing as grandparents to these children that have emotional, behavioral, physical issues.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough to be the person who loves them and also be the person who is looking out for their best interests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, one of the things I did, I try to control the situation in the beginning, and that was my coping mechanism. So like I got a whiteboard and like color coded all the appointments, and then got a separate whiteboard just for timing purposes because he was on so many drugs. And he was supposed to stay at a specific calorie goal every day. And once he got closer to needing the feeding tube, we were looking at like days without food, days without water. Once the feeding tube came, then it became a whole different issue where I had to hand feed him every 3 hours. It was nuts. And if he, we would be in public and I'd be like, okay, we have to sit here. I've got to feed you so that we stay on track so that you don't get sick. And coping was something I did, trying to control it. I definitely coped, but keeping his best interest in the forefront was really the main priority. And it, I say a lot of times it was the cancer show for the majority of the year,
How did he react to all of that?
It was so hard for him, not having any real control over, what he put in his body, where he was, he really fought against it and wanted to say in his own healthcare. And, but when you're dealing with a specific disease like that, and, we were sold into the hospital network, we were told his radiation and chemo was going to be very specific to him, but it really wasn't. It was pretty standard. That was really hard for him. He wanted, his own personal healthcare plan. And, it's challenging. Healthcare and caregiving in the States needs a lot of work, needs a lot of attention. Seems to be a very broken system right now. And we've kind of got caught in the middle of all that.
Yeah, tell us more about some of the challenges that you faced with the healthcare system.
Well, in the beginning, we met with a team of people and chemotherapist, radiologist, even a surgeon for the possibility of them cutting out the tumors, but it was so close to his carotid artery that they couldn't. And we had a plan together. And I get a phone call from the radiology department telling me that they scheduled him for all 40 sessions. But I haven't heard from the chemo department, even though we've already met with the team. We already agreed on the drugs. And I had to pretty much stalk that team and to find out that the chemotherapist no longer had space for him. And so they were trying to push him back 3 weeks from a start date. So even from the beginning, even before we stepped foot into the first radiology session, I had to advocate for him to change, protocols, doctors. I didn't care. We weren't going to delay his treatment plan by another month because he woke up October 28th with a lump on his neck and then didn't get diagnosed until November 28th and didn't start treatment until end of January. We weren't going to wait another month to start treatment because the thing was growing. It was vastly growing. So right out of the gate, we felt like we were uphill. And when you're dealing with, I spent so long, the last couple of years, I spent so long traveling the country and speaking to healthcare networks about burnout and caregiving fatigue, because healthcare professionals can have both. They can be in a place of they're totally burnt out and they have an apathy for their patients because they're so tired and that, they're understaffed, they're overworked. Mm-hmm. So I saw burnout in everyone that was working with us. But I was barely holding it together myself. I couldn't pull them aside and be like, hey, this is what I actually do for a living. Here are some tips to help you be able to support my husband better.
Right.
But we had to deal with a lot of egos. And when my husband really had a hard time with a few professionals specifically that were not putting his best interests above theirs, snarky comments. One woman told us that we were making her job hard, laughed at Gavin, my husband, when he complained that she was putting him in pain. And so, I said oftentimes, my plate is so full, I have no room on it for healthcare professional ego. And if I felt like we were having to small-in ourselves or apologize for something to support their ego, I removed them from his team.
What would you say are some of the important messages that you have for advocacy and caregiving?
Advocacy, I thought I knew what healthcare advocacy was until I got into that position where it requires, oftentimes I felt like I was his manager. I felt like I wasn't just the point person. I wasn't just his taxi or chauffeur. I wasn't just his drug administrator or his, food supplier shoving food into his body. I was the person that when we disagreed on something, I spoke up. I asked questions that I think other people will just sort of go along with. If I didn't understand a word, I would ask for it. Ask for a definition. I asked for different people if we didn't feel comfortable with them. I filed complaints when I felt like our our care wasn't being, when we didn't have excellent care, I filed complaints. I got to the
And what
point
was
where
the response to that?
we were actually given apologies. We were sent letters saying they recognized that the care we got was not the best. I joked a lot that I felt like there was probably big red arrows next to my name with like underlining in bold, like watch out for this lady. That's what I got. That's where I went. But you know what? If I didn't, he probably would have died because he required a feeding tube and he was not ready emotionally to get one when the conversation needed to happen. So let's say it was week 4, conversation is approached. Hey, we think you should have a consult for a feeding tube. He didn't want to hear it, but I still called, accepted the phone call just to find out a little bit more about it. And he wouldn't have been able to get on the schedule for 2 months, but he needed it then, right? And so we go back to the hospital, talk to them again. Okay, now he's ready. It's week 5. He accepts, he's ready. And get reprimanded from the staff about how we're making everyone's jobs complicated because it should have, whatever. Even though they're so backed up, if we would have gone through their protocol and their process, he wouldn't have been able to get one in time. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to march him into the ER and we're just going to go get it. Had I not become a pain in their side, he would have died. So we finally get to the ER and the attending checking us in says, wow, you got here in the nick of time. So you have to, advocacy is the word that we use, but looking at it really like a manager. You are, the boss lady in charge. And
we're
wild.
responsible for our families' lives.
Yeah.
And if you don't speak up about that, that's something you have to live with for the rest of your life. If you lost your husband, I'm sure, hindsight's 2020, right? Your husband's doing well today.
Yeah.
Or better, I hope.
Yeah. We have he has a 6-month scope tomorrow where he has to have this machine put up his nose, down his throat to check on the side. But he should be, at this point, it's no tumors in his body, no cancer cells found. So, but it is fascinating how, oftentimes in that experience, I was like, I can't believe this. What it is, this is what the healthcare system is like in America, or this is what caregiving is like. Like, how do people do anything else but this? Like, my life stopped, and I have a good relationship with God, and so I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do right now. This is who I am. This is who I am. This is what I'm supposed to do. My sole life purpose is to keep him alive, and that was a weird identity to sort of embody. And then once his treatment stops and the calls stop and the drugs stop and you're getting back into your real life, then it's like, okay, well, now who am I? There is no going backwards. There is simply staying open to whatever presents itself next. And so, that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book and why I'm looking forward to having more conversations like this, because there's so many family caregivers in the country, and burnout is prevalent for most of us.
I think in many ways it teaches us to listen to the really critical things in life.
Mm-hmm.
So as you say, I'm just coming out of the phase of being in the critical stage of transitioning with my grandchildren and getting them the proper team together. We now have a good team in place, and I still have to juggle the nuances of that, but they're adjusting. The consistency makes a difference. I see it in the way they act and react, and they're healthier. They're on a good road. We're all on a good road. Caregiving, taking care of myself. I can't begin to tell you, and because you've been through it yourself. I remember feeling like I came up for air one day that I hadn't been breathing. And that's the best description I can give to it. I felt like I was underwater and came up for a breath of air when I actually had a tiny bit of perspective on what I could do to take care of myself. And that if I kept going down that road, I was going to begin to fall apart. And as caregivers, as mothers, I think instinctively we are aware of that things, some more than others at different times. But regardless of that, I'm thankful that I'm not where I was 2 years ago. And yet now I still, like yourself, I'm saying, who am I now? This is obviously becoming an advocate for my cause is important to me. And that hasn't changed. I have a little more breathing room to take the experience that I've just been through and say, what do I want to do with that? How do I increase advocacy for grandparents? How do I continue to create community just as you are? But it isn't any less important to me now than it was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about self-care and what you experienced in your process. How did that change your perspective on how to take care of yourself?
I used to be the person that would get up early, spend hours on self-care in terms of meditating and journaling and enjoying the peace and quiet and stretching and and then got married. I'm a bonus mom. And so all of that sort of changed into enjoying a cup of coffee, reading a tiny thing on some app, and maybe writing a 2 paragraphs, something or another in my journal. And so that sort of shifted. And I've learned how to be really gentle with myself and changing some habits in terms of talking to God or writing in my journal or meditating. All those things don't have to happen the second I wake up. They can be spread out throughout the day. Becoming a caregiver, so the ropes of mucus that he would have to literally pull out of his mouth, I would wake up out of a dead sleep. My body would respond because I would hear him choking. Immediate panic, immediate fight or flight. So my self-care a lot of times was leaning into and using the tools I knew on how to regulate and re-regulate my emotional nervous system so that I didn't have to stay in fight or flight. So if I woke up at 4 a.m. and I heard him choking, I would, do everything I could to emotionally support him so he knew he wasn't alone. And when that passed, I would have to jump in the shower, take a cold shower, immediately decompress. And then rather than go and sit in a corner of the couch or climb into bed, it was okay, what do I have to do this day? What do we have to do to move forward today? So it's very different. It was micro resets. We're talking 30, 60 seconds at a time. When he had chemo, I would do what I could to go for a walk because 2 hours. So I would try to get out in the sunshine, go for a walk. And when he had radiation, 45 minutes, Monday through Friday, I would sit on the floor and I would stretch. I would move my body. Sometimes I would try to take a nap or I would let myself cry. But those were the things that I did to work on my nervous system, my mind, and my physical body. And I gave myself a ton of grace. So it totally slowed down. And it wasn't so much about self-care in terms of how am I trying to be healthier? How am I trying to come out of something? How am I trying to change something about myself? It was through the lens of legit survival. How am I going to get through this hour? How am I going to get through the next 20 minutes? It really shifted.
So it's interesting how these things bring lessons to us that we might not have learned otherwise.
Right.
What of this really difficult time that you've just come through have you applied to your everyday life that is a positive? Do you find particular issues that you cling to?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first burned out a decade ago, no one was really talking about burnout. Ariana Huffington was talking about it, but I had already been through it and I already sort of found my way out of it. I started sharing my experience in burnout back in like 2015, 2016, before burnout was the word it is today. But back then I took, months hiatus and took a year to really lean into how am I going to recover and who am I going to be. And now, because of that experience, sometimes my 60-second walk down the hallway was what I had between one appointment and another. And my breathing technique I used at the time was the only self-care act I did that day. Now I look at burnout recovery as a 60-second act. It is these micro things we do throughout the day to help us come back to center, to help us move out of fight or flight, to help us find a state of restoration. So in the blank space I have in the day today, rather than try to shove one more thing in between our call and another call, or between, trying to pick up the kitchen between this appointment and the other, I sit and I breathe, or I grab my Kindle and I decide to take 15 minutes and read something for pleasure. I am much softer on myself, much easier on myself, and I give myself a lot more space to breathe.
All good things.
Yeah.
What has it done for your self-worth and your sense of peace?
It's amazing what we're able to do as human beings. I actually gave myself a alter ego name. I called her the Spicy Viking.
Love it.
And that's who I grew into. That's who I became.
Spicy Viking.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't know I had that in me. I didn't know I had that tone. I didn't know I had that strength. I didn't know I had that, I didn't know that she was in there, but she's always been there. I just had to be tested beyond any limit I had recollection of. But it's amazing what we're capable of doing when we're tested. And I mean, I learned a tremendous amount about myself. There's definitely a deeper sense of worth I don't allow, if I have a negative thought about myself or about, our situation or our life, I don't spend days dwelling on it. It is a slippery slope. I go down for maybe 15 minutes and then I'm like, wait a second. And I'm able to pull myself back up and my mental health is definitely clear. Sense of peace, I don't know about that one yet because I feel like I'm still in the recovery phase and leaning into how to create that more regularly in my life. And those are the things that I think I'm practicing of finding that peace.
What do you do to create greater sense of self-peace?
When I'm on my walk in the morning, I engage my senses. So I'm very aware of the colors, of the sensations I have, of the smells. If I smell something really great, I will literally stop and like, oh my gosh, where's that coming from? And I allow myself to explore a little bit.
Smell the roses.
Yeah. And when I'm stretching afterwards, I make sure to actually stretch my body, which I feel like if my body is looser, things just sort of, I have that deeper breath work. While I am stretching, I do pray. I sit there and just allow myself to sort of be held by the universe there. And then I've actually just started talking about it more, where I do have some lessons to share. I do have some wisdom to provide here. And so, not trying to hide anything or be, um, let that just sort of go by the wayside. Oh yeah, we just did that. No big deal. Like, talking about it more allows me to bring up the emotions and sort of clear them, anything that's sort of stuck. So
I don't know about you, but I know that I've found that just by speaking with others that are going through something similar, because all of our stories are different, that me speaking about it helps them. There's the sharing, the community. It's empowering.
Yeah, I agree. I do have some people that are going through it now and have reached out and being able to provide, okay, well, this is what I was doing at this point in the journey. This is where he was in this point in the journey. And head and neck cancer is more prevalent today than it's been in the past. And so more people are, hearing about it. Yeah. And I found that when I was in the thick of it, I wanted more community around me. So I actually did reach out to a number of caregivers, and we had a thread going, just a text thread, and we would talk when we could. And, this is what I need today. So we would share songs or funny images or funny stories, and those little pops really helped.
Do you find any resistance or?
I haven't yet, I guess, which I'm grateful for. That I've come in contact with has been really open. I guess negative experiences with the same doctors. Like sometime, we had one woman who had the same, he didn't get surgery, but one woman in our network did work with that surgeon. And so she had a different experience, but same hospital network. But yeah, so far everyone's been very open, which is great. I'm a, professional communicator, so more communication, the better.
Yes, I agree with you. Well, thanks, Carrie. Thanks for sharing your experience with us. Would you let us know where we can find your book and where your website is?
Sure. CarrieSeverson.com. My Unapologetically Enough, you can find there. My burnout recovery journal is there. And I actually just came out with burnout recovery affirmation cards, which are really fun. Those are also there.
Awesome. Great Christmas gifts.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today for another episode of Grandparents Raising Grandchildren, Nurturing Through Adversity. I encourage you to share both your challenges and your successes with us. Your story is undoubtedly one someone else needs to hear. Submit your stories to the links provided in the podcast information. Your contributions will enrich upcoming conversations, creating a more supportive community in which we can learn and grow together. Do your strong-willed children seem to know exactly which buttons to push? Do you feel the heat rising inside when they respond in ways you never would have dared with your own parents? Well, you're not alone. We've all been there. Anger takes over, patience runs thin, and before you know it, you've lost it, despite wishing for a better way. Kirk Martin is the founder of Celebrate Calm and the Calm Parenting podcast. Kirk has helped me and thousands of other parents with their strong-willed children. He shares transformative insights and practical strategies to help you stay cool, calm, and collected, even in the most challenging parenting moments. Discover how to turn frustration into empowerment and create the peaceful home environment you've always envisioned. Tune in next week to learn how to connect deeply with your strong-willed child and find the calm amidst the chaos. Don't miss this chance to transform your parenting approach and build a stronger bond with your child. Thank you for tuning in to Grandparents Raising Grandchildren, Nurturing Through Adversity. Remember, you are not alone. Together we can find strength and hope in the face of adversity. Peace be with you, and I pray that you find some time this week to listen to your inner wisdom amongst the noise and the pandemonium of this world.